What's up, everyone? Welcome to our next installment of our NBA Prospect Player Profile series. That's a lot of P's right there, I just
Yeah.
realized. But this is Jordan Jaika, aka Dr. Fantasy, as always, here with the Fantasy Caveman. Today we are talking about Onyeka Okongwu, 6'9", 235-pound freshman from USC. Last season as a freshman, he averaged 16.2 points, 8.6 rebounds, 2.7 blocks, and 1.2 steals. We're going to kick it off with Okongwu's strengths. What do you have, Caveman?
All right. Starting off, and we obviously have to do a pod on James Wiseman yet, which will be coming out at some point before the draft. But uh, this Okungwu looks like he could be the best big man in this draft. But getting into some of his strengths, I think the biggest thing that I noticed with him, he's very strong and athletic for his size. I mean, you look at him; he runs the open court very well. And a lot of times when you see the guys with his size and his frame, they kind of slow down your transition offense. And that, but he's like right down the court with the guards. His hustle is pretty is pretty it's definitely pretty to watch there. Then you mentioned he he didn't really take the 3-pointer wasn't his game in college. He only attempted 4 threes last year, but he did start to shoot a little bit from mid range, and his form doesn't look that bad. And 72% for a big man is actually pretty solid for a free throw percentage. And then the final thing that I want to mention here is like you said, he averaged 2.7 blocks, but he does it without following. He knows how to go up there and get the ball without really initiating contact with the offensive player, and that's such a valuable trait, especially so you see a lot of shot blockers in the league now. Uh, they tend to get in foul trouble quite a bit. If you have a guy that is able to have that kind of impact on the defensive end, blocking shots, but he's also not following in the process, that's just a big thing to put in his favor there.
hmm Yeah, and I mean that's one of the first things you notice about him is his length. He's a very physical player. I think he plays bigger than his size, actually. I
Yeah.
mean, when you look at it, he's only 6'9". I mean, that's a difference. James Wiseman, I believe, is 7'1". So I mean, there's a little bit of a 4-inch difference there. So I mean, that's the first thing I notice is I feel like he plays bigger. It's probably his wingspan 7'2", so that's probably why it feels like he plays a lot bigger, and that's one of the reasons that he is such a great rim protector. And being a rim protector is just as you said, it's more than just blocking shots. It's blocking shots without fouling and, really protecting that paint. So even though he's not that traditional 7-foot big man that we're used to 15 years ago, he still has that length and that size to do and be a traditional rim blocker. So I definitely think that's going to be one of his biggest strengths in the NBA. Um, he's another point on his offensive game, which I'm not the biggest fan of his offensive game, but he is elite in the pick and roll. That's one of the things you'll notice, and that's what a lot of scouts are going to point out about him. Is that's really where he shines is in the pick and roll, and obviously that'll fit him perfectly with a lot of the point guards in today's modern NBA. And I'll mention some great pick and roll players when we get to the NBA comparison section. Um, he gets to the line pretty frequently. You mentioned he is a good for his size. 72%, as far as I'm concerned, is fantastic. So
Hmm.
I'll take 72% all day. He gets to the line frequently. He kind of lives in the paint. But I mean, at least he's converting those shots, unlike other big men. So he's just one of his great strengths is getting to the line and shooting free throws. He's an elite defender. That kind of goes along with being a great rim protector. He is a great rebounder. You can't go without saying that. He on the offensive and defensive glass, he averaged almost 3.5 offensive rebounds a game, which is very effective. So you got to mention his great rebounding. Then lastly, part of him being and living in the paint as an offensive player, he is very efficient. That leads to a lot of efficiency. His field goal percentage was 61.6% last year, so very efficient there, which is what you would expect from a guy that lives in the paint a little bit. So I think that's all that I have. And one of the things I do want to mention is these strengths of his. I mean, he is elite. He is an elite rim protector. He's an elite defender at the 5 position. And even though he's only 6'9", he's probably going to play the 5 for a team, most likely. He could maybe play the 4 against a traditional. I mean, it would kind of depend on the makeup of your team, but I think he can play the 5 in today's NBA. But all of these skills, pick and roll, he's elite. I mean, every scout and every report you read, it's going to involve saying he is the best pick and roll player from any position in this year's class. And, that's going to help teams tremendously on the offensive end. So I think that's all I have for his strengths. So let's move over to his weaknesses. What do you have there, Caveman?
All right, and like you said, his strengths are they're just not strength. He's a his areas of strength. I see that very often. I mean, first thing I noticed. I mean, obviously the first thing you notice is he's not. See, I don't know if he's a great 3-point shooter or not because he just hasn't taken them. His shot, his form at the line, and he did take a few mid range jumpers at the last season. So he doesn't have a bad form. I did just think it's just wasn't part of his game at the college level. But in today's NBA, there's a very good chance the team that drafts him is gonna be asking to be able to knock down the occasional perimeter jump shot, and whether he's able to be respectable from that range is gonna go a long way in determining how high he can actually rise in this league. Another thing, this just comes down to discipline for me, is he falls for a pump fakes a lot. He sells out. He's a great shot blocker, but part of that is because he tries blocking everything.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's better. Sometimes you look at it's better suited for him to just play the guy and just play the defense, but he sometimes goes up for the block and it burns him sometimes. So that's something he's gonna have to learn to be a bit more disciplined on the defense. Now he's a great defender, but he could work on his discipline, especially on the defensive end.
Yep, and I would agree with a lot of that. The other questions that I have on the offensive side, in addition to his jump shot, which he doesn't have much of a mid-range game right now. You'll see him take mid-range jumpers every once in a while, but not frequently. So, I mean, it's one of those things in terms of, we don't really know if he's going to be a great three-point shooter. Is when you're that size, his entire life he's probably played the 5 for every team he's been on, and he's probably just never been asked to, stretch the floor and shoot threes. So, I don't know if he'll ever be asked to do that, but, it's a question mark. We don't know if he's going to be able to do it, and it's the same with this mid-range game. Not that people care about mid-range games anymore, but he doesn't have the greatest jump shot as of right now. And some of his offensive fundamentals I question a little bit from the film that I watched that wasn't just a highlight film. And it's just little things where when he's in the paint, he's not very creative. He tends to get a lot of his points off of offensive rebounds, off of lob passes. He doesn't really do much in terms of creating his own offense. I mean, it's really he catches the ball and he shoots it. That's typically what you see from him. So I think that's going to be a pretty common theme in the NBA, is I don't know if he's going to be able to create his own shot or if he's going to rely on a strong pick and roll point guard realistically. So I think that's to be seen. Just because he hasn't shown those fundamentals doesn't mean he can't work on them. A lot of that is just
Yeah.
developing. One thing I know a lot of people pointed out is his hook shot is really bad. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you've seen develop in players over time. So, he can work on some of those fundamentals, but as of right now, he doesn't have a very fundamental offensive game. He relies on that athleticism and his teammates setting him up. And I think that's pretty much all that I have. I liked the point that you brought up about his defense and trying to block everything. I think that comes with a little more experience from him because there's not very many flaws in his defensive game and
Yeah.
what you ask from a rim protector. But he's going to have to learn that you don't have to block every shot. He's not going to average 5 blocks a game in the NBA as much as he might want to. So let's get to a few NBA comparisons then. Well, what do you have for this one, Caveman?
All right. So, and this is I have a name I really like, but again, this is a situation where I want to see if you say his name. So I'm gonna go to my other names on here. I mean, he kind of reminds me of a younger Orlando Magic Dwight Howard.
Hmm.
I mean, Dwight Howard, like everybody, you think of Dwight Howard as a traditional center back in the day,
Yep.
but Dwight Howard's not that tall. He's like 6'10" or something like I don't think Dwight Howard's not 7 foot. I'd be surprised. So
Yeah, he's 6'10".
yeah, so very similar size wise. Both of them without much of a offensive game. I don't know if Dwight Howard's ever been known for shooting the ball. Probably not.
Has he even taken a jump shot in his entire career?
He's probably taken like a buzzer beater or something. But yeah, so I think a younger Dwight Howard is a fair comparison. And then Clint Capella is another name that comes to mind. They're both, I believe, Clint Capella 6'9", but just a high energy defensive presence that doesn't really offer a ton of upside offensively, but just kind of that elite rim protecting undersized center. I think they both kind of fit that mold there. So what do you?
I had 3 names. The first one is one that I saw on several other scouting databases. It's Bam Adebayo of
That's
the
what I was.
Miami Heat. That's one from you. Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a pretty solid one. Bam is a very athletic big man. I think his ball handling is a little better than Okongwu's at that point. So it's definitely, or at this point. So I don't think it's a perfect comparison, but they're both athletic players. Bam is only 6'9". I mean, same thing. He has great length and he plays a lot bigger. I think a lot of people would be surprised to know that Bam's not that tall. I mean, because when you watch him play, I've always felt like, oh man, that guy is your traditional. I mean, he's not traditional, but he is that 7 foot big man that you look for. But he's not. He's only 6'9". So I do get that comparison. Obviously, it's tough to get a perfect comparison, but I do think that's a good one. Other ones that came to mind, and I mentioned great pick and roll players. John Collins and Montrezl Harrell have both been fantastic pick and roll players, kind of undersized for their position in terms of height. They have great length, and that's where size is always so tough to discuss because you look out 6'9", that's not that tall for a center, but he has a 7'2" wingspan, so really that's every bit of length that you need at the 5 position. So, but John Collins, we've seen a great pick and roll game when he's been healthy with Trae Young. Montrezl Harrell, we've seen it not as much last season as much as when he played with Chris Paul, but same thing. He had a very strong pick and roll game. So I kind of like, based on their size and their length, and I like those comparisons for their offensive games. And I think Bam I like defensively. I can see a lot of similarities between Okongwu and Bam defensively. So I think it's a mixture of those 3 players that I could see for Okongwu, which, I mean, that's pretty high praise. Those are 3 players that all-star caliber. I don't believe Harrell's made an all-star team. John Collins, I believe, will at some point, and Bam did this year. So, good comparisons there. Let's go to the ideal fit then. What do you have for this game, man?
Okay, now this is there's a couple of ones here. The Minnesota Timberwolves are the first team that comes to mind. I'd be surprised if they kept their draft pick and took him number one. But would it be the worst? Would it necessarily be a really bad move? I don't think so. I think his upside, and we're talking. We haven't really talked about his floor or his ceiling that much yet, but the reality is he has the potential to be a top 5 big man in this league.
Mm-hmm.
His defensive ability alone, if he adds even a sliver of offensive game to his arsenal, watch out, because he's gonna take the league by storm if he's able to add some stuff to his offensive game.
Mm-hmm.
But in Minnesota, you put him with Cat in that front court, which Cat is not really exactly known for his defense. I would say, and the Cat's not the greatest defender, but perfect comp. You put Okongwu next to him in that front court. I think they complement each other really well, in my opinion, with him and Cat. And then other team I had in mind was the Washington Wizards. So I mean, similar. They really lacked rim protection, and rebounding the ball last year. Kunwu comes in and becomes an anchor of that Wizards defense. I just think that seems like a really good fit as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like those ones. Another one that I had, number 3 overall pick. I've seen him mocked here a few times, but if I had to pick my number 1, I'd say it's the Charlotte Hornets. I mean, right now, I've seen quite a few mocks have them go with a guard, which I think is silly, especially with Grants last year. They still have Terry Rozier, but I would be surprised if they went with a guard. I mean, I think that they should go with Wiseman or Okongwu at the 3rd pick. Cody Zeller, I believe, right now, or one of the Zellers, I think it's Cody, is their starting 5 right now. So, I mean, that's a position I really think they could improve on and pair with their guards. If not, I think they should go with an Obi Toppin and get a guy that can play that 3 spot for him, 3-4 spot. I think PJ Washington's been playing there right now. So, I really think at the 3rd pick there they should go with a big man. It's kind of a toss up right now if people like Wiseman or Okongwu more. So either way, whoever they favor, that's the direction I would go if I was Charlotte. It's definitely a need for them. I think both guys are going to be, I don't want to say dominating big men, but I think they both have the potential to be dominating big men. I would never guarantee someone's going to be dominant, but I think they both have that potential, and I think that's something they could really use in Charlotte. So, realistically, when you look at it, a lot of these top teams here in the top 10, I think, could use an additional big man. And that's why I think Okongwu really is a good fit anywhere that he goes. When you have a defensive presence like that, I mean, you'll find a spot for him. And a lot of these teams, the reality, when you're a bottom of the barrel team, these are the worst defensive teams in the league. I mean, that's just the reality. So having a presence like Okongwu, I think he would really fit in anywhere. The Bulls were my second one. I think he could play pretty well with the Bulls as well, and those young guards they have, because I still don't think that the Bulls should draft a point guard. But that's just they probably will. That's just my opinion, because I just don't understand why they would, because Kobe White looked so good last year, but what do I know? But yeah, so Charlotte's definitely my number 1 there. So just to sum up, Okongwu for me, he's one of those guys, I think maybe the first time that we've said this, I think that he is a safe pick with a really high ceiling. I don't know if we've said that about any prospect yet, but I don't think Okongwu is going to be the kind of player that fades out of the NBA. I think, once again, if you're looking at worst case scenario, He's going to be maybe your first big man off the bench, or maybe he's in your starting lineup, but not one of your better players in the starting lineup. And he's going to be a great rim protector and a great defender. At his best, he could be an all-star caliber player like Dwight Howard. So I think that that's what you're looking for in a top pick, in my opinion. Of course, you want that superstar ability, but you also don't want to completely miss out and have your number 3 overall pick bust. And I think Okongwu is really safe in that regard, that he's going to have a nice career, but he also has that all-star potential.
Yeah, and we kind of alluded to this already. He's a very weird case in this draft, as is the case with a lot of guys. But you look at mocks and I haven't seen him go number 1 in any mocks. He's not really being discussed at one, but he has been discussed going number 2. It's been floated around a few times that the Golden State actually likes Okongwu more than White. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility that he goes 2. So his defensive ability is going to give him a solid role even if his offense never develops and he never adds anything to his offensive game. His defensive ability alone is going to earn him a solid role on a team, and you can't say that about a lot of guys in this class. A lot of these guys in this class, if they don't work on their weaknesses or their strengths don't show out, like they're gonna fall out of the league. I don't see a situation where not only do I not think Okongwu won't get fizzle out, but I personally don't believe there's a situation where Okongwu does not have a good role on the team. And that's an insane. A lot of guys that we say have high floors. He's a friend. He'll have a little bit of a role. He won't fall out of the league, but he'll have some role. You can't say that with Okongwu. The reality is with Okongwu, his floor is the top big man off the bench. That's his floor, in my opinion. I don't see him falling below that. So when you have a guy that has that kind of floor, where even if he doesn't live up to his potential, he's still a solid number 1 big man off the bench. That gives you a good amount of certainty in a draft that doesn't really have a lot of certainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that he is really he's been a top 10 pick, but he's really starting to find himself in that top 3 discussion in a lot of mocks that I'm seeing and from a lot of different scouting databases. So, and I think that's exactly it. When you start to look at a lot of these prospects, there's a lot of question marks. But so I think teams in this range can say, hey, we can have a guy that's going to have a role for us for years, and maybe he turns out to be an all-star, superstar player. So I think that's why he's been shooting up draft boards. So I think that's a good point to end on. So we appreciate you guys watching. Or listening. We will be posting 6 more after this. It's going to be the top 6 prospects. Well, might not be the top 6 picks or top 6 prospects, because who knows in this year's draft, but the top 6, depending on what database you're looking at, they'll definitely all be top 10 picks. I probably shouldn't even say that, because who knows once again, but most likely going to all be top 10 picks.
LaMelo's falling out of the top 10. That's what you're saying.
He should. That guy sucks, but we'll talk about that later. But we appreciate you guys watching or listening. Make sure you subscribe, and we'll see you next time.
Yep.